This season is called Home, and there are 2 reasons for that. Spiritually, God has welcomed me back home, a story that will unfold throughout this channel. But this series is also about a physical journey. After spending 11 years living alone, to living with my husband for a year, then moving back in with my mum at 36, there's been a lot of change. Now I'm home. Get comfortable as we unpack. Previously on Home. Welcome to episode 3, old build or new build?
I prefer old build.
Why?
Because first, the prices are reasonable. Secondly, you can modify it to anything you want, you know.
Personally, I do like a new build, and the reason is I just like knowing that I'm the first one to use everything in the property.
Are you sure?
Oh yeah, that's the point, because really and truly, when the builders are working there, they're using the toilet. Make sure you're caught up on the previous episode, and let's dive into today's episode.
Oh yeah, return of the man. There it is. Return of the man. Once again, return of the man. Watch my flow. You know that I'll be back. Here I am. Return of the man.
Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths.
I'm going to let my husband kick this one off. Obviously, we've seen some new build properties now, and we've seen some old build properties. So in terms of pros for old builds, what would you say are pros?
I think in terms of old builds, it's the durability that counts. Yeah, because they use quality materials to do their houses.
Yeah.
I think houses from 80s, 70s, 80s, yes, you know, the way they do it is quite strong. You know, it can withstand like heavy storm, hurricanes, stuff like that.
Well, we're not...
I'm just giving you an example,
Yeah. We're not trying to put that to the test, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. I feel like when you walk into new builds, you can feel that it's...
Yeah, even when you touch the wall, it's like kind of gives you this hollow sound.
Yeah.
I don't think new builds, it's not that quite strong. It can't withstand like all these kind of natural disaster and stuff.
So one of the pros of old builds is a con for you for new builds, in that the new build con is that they're not as strong as old builds, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just that it's just use kind of a flashy things just to attract people, the buyers, you know. But in terms of durability, is it's 0.
Okay, cool.
I'll just rate it 0.
A pro for old build is the space. When comparing the bedroom sizes for some of the old builds we saw compared to the new builds, obviously with Red Row we saw the bigger versions of new builds, but I think if I want to say Taylor Wimpey, so for a 3-bedroom, essentially it was a 2.5 bed that Taylor Wimpey was saying is a 3-bed. Whereas if you were to look at a 3-bedroom in an old property, most of the time you would actually get a 3-bed, not a 2.5. So although box rooms can still be found in old properties, generally there's still more space within the older properties anyway. They're not necessarily skimping on the bathroom space or the hallway space, even the living room space. I just found that this relates to plot size. Old builds tend to have more plot size than new builds also. With the new build properties, they're trying to fit as many properties within a piece of land as possible. Whereas it's more likely when you're looking at old builds, yeah, you might have a row of terraced houses, but their garden will be more sizable in comparison to the new build terraced houses where the gardens might be a bit more smaller. So the amount of land you own when buying a new build in comparison to the old build is much smaller. Any other pros you have for old builds?
The prices as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the prices are quite reasonable. Yeah, I don't know. That's why you remember I was asking you why new builds are so expensive, but they are not quite. That's the durability is not really that, you know, something to
Boast about.
Yeah. So, but for me, I think the prices for old builds it's not that bad, it's quite reasonable.
Obviously, all this that we're saying depends on location, right? So what Eric said is very true for Kent. When we're looking at the older properties in Kent, if you're doing like for like 3-bedroom versus new build 3-bedroom, the older properties in Kent are more affordable than the new properties they have coming out. So like, for example, it's very possible in Kent to find a 3-bedroom, downstairs toilet, lounge, family bathroom, and ensuite for under 400,000. It's very possible. But when we're looking at the properties, for example, Taylor Wimpey's one side at 429,995, and I believe even Red Rose 3-bedroom, they had properties starting from 380,000. But it depends on which part of Kent you're looking. Within London, you might find it's cheaper buying a new build based on certain areas. So when I say that, I mean, for example, if you're going to Clapham, guaranteed you might get an old build for 1 million plus. Certain parts of London are really expensive. Whereas if you want to buy a new build within London, you might get one for 500, 600. So not as expensive as 1 mil, but it's still it's still pricey anyway. The potential for value appreciation is higher within older builds than within newer builds. Anytime you buy an old property, it's more likely that it will appreciate in price quicker than a new build. And the reason I say that is because new builds are already inflated in price. It's very possible that you could pay 500,000 for a new build property, and within a year it actually depreciates in value and it could cost maybe 480,000 or 490,000. And the reason that is because when the market actually stabilizes and it comes into the same kind of market range as the older buildings surrounding it, you find that the new build was inflated in price. What you pay for an old build today, it is more likely that within a year you would have some kind of increase in equity. Whereas, like I said, with a new build, within a year, you never know, it could appreciate, but it also could depreciate just because in comparison to the area that the new build is in, maybe they've realized that, oh, the older builds are a lot less in price, and so they can't really inflate it that highly. One that I will mention, since Eric doesn't have any more that I can think of right now, is character. So old builds tend to have more character. With these new builds, they all look the same. They do. You go from one room to another, go to a different house.
Yeah.
It's the same tiles. Maybe it's just that the house is a little bit bigger because it's a 4-bedroom in comparison to a 3-bed. So they have a standard way of building their houses. Unless, which is now a pro for new builds, unless you say you want upgrades. Depending on which part of the process you decide to buy a new build house, there's a potential for you to create the house to look how you want it, right? And this is based obviously on planning permission as well, and how much space you have, etc, etc. But one of the things that new builds do promote is the option of you getting upgrades to some of these materials and the looks and layouts of the property. So for example, as you saw in the Red Row properties, the house with 4 bedrooms, the kitchen there was what they would call their standard kitchen. So if you never went with an upgrade and you chose a standard kitchen, and say your best friend also decided to buy a house next door and they chose a standard kitchen, both of you would have the same tiles in the kitchen, both of you would have the same cabinets, both of you will have the same appliances. There'll be no difference. If your cousin then decides that she likes your house and your best friend's house and wants to buy next door because that's become available, or maybe they create in phase 2, and your cousin has a bit more money and decides that she wants to upgrade her kitchen, then the possibility of them doing that is there. You can go to the developer and say, you don't want the standard kitchen, you want an upgrade, and they'll show you a variety of tiles, appliances, cabinets, stuff like that that's available. So essentially you're creating your dream home. Mind you, all of this costs money, okay? So remember that new builds are already inflated in price. So just bear that in mind. With old builds, they do have this particular kind of character that you won't necessarily find if you were to compare one old build against another, okay? So I think depending on the kind of person you are, if you really care about attention to detail and you want to be able to say that, you know, oh, this house is a 1960s house, look at how they did the skirting boards and look at how they've tiled the roof and whatever the case may be, then definitely go for an old build, because you won't have a standard box-sized house that maybe every Joe, John, Jill, Jack in the vicinity has. But yeah, I'm not knocking anyone that has new builds or old builds or whatever the case may be. Obviously, it's all down to preference. So please don't say that I'm saying that you're boring because you can only afford a standard new build house. That's not what I'm saying, okay? In connection to character, old builds also have an established neighborhood. When buying our old builds, the likelihood is that, you know, the same people have lived on the street for however many years. Let's be real. It has the same GP that I did from 20 years ago, the same schools from 30 years ago. That shop has been owned by the local whoever for however long. So that's another thing. If you're looking for security, if you're looking for safety, if you're looking for how an area is, it's more likely you'll be able to find out that information when looking at old build properties. With new build properties, because sometimes they're being developed on pieces of land that literally had nothing on it, you just don't have an established neighborhood. All of you are new, right? All of you are getting to know the area. All of you have moved from wherever you may have moved from. And so you're just about getting to establish some kind of neighborhoods there. Again, it all depends. It's down to you and your preference. For me, especially moving out of London, safety and security was a big thing. So I want to be able to say that wherever we move to, I've been able to look at, you know, violence reports or crime reports and see what's that area saying. Is it an area affected by antisocial behavior? Is it an area where maybe there's gang culture? Is it an area where maybe there's flooding, you know? Burglary. All these kind of things. So you can find that out, I would say, easier when it comes to older properties because they've been there for a while. Like I said, there's an established neighborhood. Whereas with new properties, you might not necessarily know what you're going to get. And the reason I'm saying might is because sometimes new build properties do come maybe behind older build properties. So the likelihood is you might still be able to find out what the area is like. Old builds, a lot of them have neighborhood watches. When you start looking at old build houses, guys, oh my gosh, you start noticing things.
They know everyone there. Like they've been there for throughout their life.
Yeah,
so
most of the time, yeah.
They know every single person there coming in, going out. Oh, it's difficult for, you know,
just anyone to walk up on the scene. Because I remember when we're looking at properties, people will be looking like, who are you? Okay, you're new to the neighborhood. But yeah, those are some of the pros that I would say about old builds. Let's move on to the cons of old builds, because obviously just because we're saying they're pros doesn't mean that there aren't any cons. So are there any cons you want to mention?
Some cons with old builds, not all, but some of, especially those ones really old. Some of them are really old. You know, you find some cracks around the walls, and the roofs as well might be leaking and stuff. So yeah, you'll be ready to do some work on it. Yeah, that's the cons.
Following on from that, actually, with older builds, what you find is that they're not as energy efficient as new builds. So you're gonna spend a lot on bills. When it comes to trying to heat up the house, yeah, you're gonna spend a lot, just because, like Eric mentioned, although they use really good materials, those materials don't necessarily withstand this cold weather in the UK. So they're not made to keep heat in. And I know with new builds, they're specifically meant to help you save costs on energy. They're literally created to be energy efficient. They keep heating a lot more and a lot longer than old builds would, unless of course you do something to ensure that the old build is up to standard so that energy efficiency goes up in rating.
These new builds, they use modern insulations. Yeah.
Okay.
But old builds, I don't think they are. It's just like old insulation. So
Yeah.
it's easy for code to come in.
So just know that if you buy an old build, you're likely to spend more money on renovating because you might find a leak, a crack, or it's not energy efficient enough. So maybe you need to get some solar panels, maybe you need to change the whole boiling system. You know, I've heard of people say they had to rewire the whole house, and those things cost a lot of money. So that's a con that you should take into account.
If you want to go for old builds, don't really go for those ones really, really old, you know.
What if that's what they can afford?
Then be ready to spend some money. Be ready to spend some money on renovation.
I agree.
Just go for the ones, you know, I don't know, from 60s, 50s.
Those still need work, babe.
Yeah, you can still find someone in a good shape, in a pretty good shape.
True. That you don't need to do work straight away, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that you're just saying, let's settle here for 2 or 3 years before we now put money in to do some work. You know, you can find a lot of properties out there that will suit that need. So the cracks and leaks Eric mentioned about, and for example, the roof, these all come under hidden issues that even if you get a survey done, you might not necessarily find out until you actually move into the property. Maybe you turn on water and then a pipe bursts, you know, it could just happen that way. Or in the case of one of my friends, in her survey, nothing came out about the roof, but once she got into the property, found out that she had to change the roof because there was, I don't know if there was a hole or there was a leak. But some of these things you might not find out unless maybe there's a storm, for example, you know. So yeah, there will be some hidden issues that you might find. The last 2 cons I would say are there's no warranty or guarantee with old build houses, whereas with new builds there are.
Yeah.
So I know with new builds they tend to give majority what I've seen is 10-year guarantee.
Yeah.
So within that 10 year, if anything happens, they can come back into your property and help you with that issue. And obviously old builds don't have that kind of warranty or guarantee. So whatever issue happens within 10 years, know that you're sorting out those issues by yourself, okay? But having said that, new builds will still have hidden issues as well, to be fair. And one thing about it is because the surface that the new build is created on, that land is still going to move. So within 10 years, what you're going to find is you will find some cracks anyway. You might even find cracks within the first 2 years, you know. But these are the things that fall under the guarantee that they can come and fix, to be fair. The last con of old builds would be that I think sometimes people get this idea that, oh, we're getting an old build, we can easily renovate and just add extensions and stuff like that. But actually, you can't just do that off the bat. You need planning permission. And sometimes it might be restricted to do all of these enhanced renovations that you want to do. So just bear that in mind in case you've seen a property and you think, oh yeah, it's old, but actually I can just do X, Y, Z. Especially if it's a property that is not detached. If it's a property you share with neighbours in terms of maybe terraced house or semi-detached, you're probably going to have planning permission, not just from the council, but from your neighbour. For example, if you're going to knock the party wall that's a divider between both of your houses, your neighbour might turn around and say no because they have the right to. So you do get some restrictions in what you can do with the property. I believe we've gone through the pros of new builds, having spoken about some of the cons of old builds, but just to run through quickly. So what's the first thing you would say?
Energy efficiency.
I even think it's a law. I think it's regulated that they have to be energy efficient. Another pro, something that we've touched on already, is the design of new builds. We're in a modern era now. Everyone wants things to look modern, you know. They want their house to look snazzy and jazzy. And maybe some of the things we were talking about when it comes to character with old builds, that's not your interest. You do not care for character. You want something that's updated. You want something to boast about because it's got modern finishes and stuff. The new build is definitely your bet.
Next one is lower maintenance costs.
Yeah. Everything is new. So what's there to maintain? And because you've got your guarantee, your warranty, hopefully some of these things fall under that as well. I don't know because we haven't bought a new build, but automatically you have lower maintenance costs. Another one?
Customization.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, you know, Eric loves his flooring and he loves the tiles. This is something that would really...
And my garden also.
True. So a new build is something that would really, you know, capture his eye, I would say. Not necessarily his heart and definitely not his pocket. But customization. So if you really want to snazz it up and make it your own, then you have that opportunity to. Another pro I'd say of a new build is no one has lived there before. And so you don't have to worry about getting into a chain to buy the property. For those of you who don't know, a chain is when, let's use Eric and I for example. So Eric wants to sell his property. And in selling his property, he wants to buy my property, right? So it could be, let's say my sister's sitting here for example. My sister's also interested in buying Eric's sold property. So that's a chain. There's people involved, right? That's a chain. Now, it's likely that you could get delays because maybe something has happened to my property that I'm trying to sell. So it could be, I could be in a chain. So I'm waiting for someone else to approve the fact that I'm buying their property, for example. So because I'm delayed in that process, Eric now can't sell his property because he hasn't signed to buy my property, which then affects my sister who wants to buy Eric's property. Does that make sense? So with a chain, sometimes it's dependent on what's happening with the seller before you. I'll give another example. Say maybe I've bought a house or I've moved in with someone, whatever. And Eric has said, okay, cool. He's signing on the dotted line. He's ready to buy my property. However, he can only buy my property once my sister has paid him for the property. But my sister now has a delay because maybe she's still waiting to get the last bit of her money together. Or whatever the case may be, there could be anything, right? Eric technically will not move on signing the contract to buy my property until he has the money confirmed that my sister is going to pay him for his property. So that's what a chain looks like. I hope I've explained that well enough. If I've just confused you, please, Google is your best friend. AI is your best friend. Please, please, please. But essentially, that's a chain. With new builds, you don't have none of that. You're not waiting for someone to sell a property before you buy the property. The new build is vacant. There is no chain. You can move in straight off the bat. The only person that is going to delay is probably you, or it could be your builder. But that's a con. We'll get to that. So the final pro, I'm going to let Eric talk about.
Yeah, they have to follow the new building regulations to get into the new standard of new building regulation.
Yeah. We experienced this as a perfect example where we were coming from, right?
Yeah.
So the year we were moving out of that property, suddenly they came and said that they needed to change the front door because it wasn't compliant with building regulations. So new properties, as they're upgrading new building regulations, the developers obviously are in the know. They need to know about these things. So they will be ensuring that they follow the standards in order to meet those building regulations. I've heard of many landlords now who have issues with this because as a landlord of an old build, you need to ensure that your tenants are safe within their building. And so a lot of landlords are now like, but who's paying to upgrade all these things to ensure that it's compliant with building regulations? So that's something that you won't have to worry about when it comes to new builds because it's already meeting the standards. I think that's it in terms of pros. That's enough, I believe. Yeah. Let's move on to the cons. We've already mentioned a few of them, to be fair. So one of them, of course, is the higher purchase price.
Yeah. The prices are ridiculous.
And I believe that all new builds have a premium on them just because they're new builds. So don't think that even if you move to, I don't know, up north, that is going to be any different. If you compare it to the older buildings that it's next to, you still find that the new builds are at a premium price. So that's just how it goes.
Next one is the sizes of the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, because they are trying to fix everything. I think they're trying to just make as much money as they can. You know, try to build more houses as many as they can in a very tiny plot. So at the end of the day, you're gonna get a very tiny house. You know, there's no space. So that's the main problem of these new builds. The amount of land you're gonna own is gonna be very, very small to compare with old builds.
Something that we haven't mentioned, actually I just mentioned it briefly now, is delays. So obviously with new builds, they're building, right? So you don't know whether it's actually going to finish at the time they estimate it to finish. For example, I remember during the COVID years, because of delays in shipment, houses that were being built then, the estimated date of those houses being released were delayed. Even some construction work had to stop during that time as well, actually. So again, another reason for delay. And then also, the cost of building materials also ties in with that, because over the last few years, building materials have really increased in price. And, you know, this might cause delays to developers. There could be potential delays to you moving into a new build property, and it could be for a variety of reasons. And another thing, like we mentioned, is, you know, because the property is on a new surface, some sort of snagging issues or settling issues as the property settles into its new environment. But like I said, that's covered most times under your guarantee. So it's not something that I would say is high cause for concern, but it's just something that you should know. So the final one I will say with new builds is, to be fair, I don't think it really happens with old builds, but I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because you might be in an old build property that has this. So what we found with new builds, some of them that we went to visit anyway, is that you now have to pay service charge.
Yeah.
And ground rent, okay? So with older builds, you don't get this, the ones that I've seen anyway. But with new builds, because of the area that they're developing in, majority of the time you'll see that they have pretty grounds around them, okay? Maybe they have a lake here or a little playground or some greenery here. I remember every time we went to visit new build properties, I would ask, how much is the ground rent? How much is the service charge? And all of them had them. So I wasn't expecting this, and thank God that my sister told me about this when she moved into her first property, because I wouldn't have thought to ask. I always thought that service charge and ground rent was only common to apartments and flats because they're leasehold properties, right? And with leasehold properties, you don't own the land that the building is on, you're leasing that land. And so for that reason, they'll charge you service charge and ground rent to look after the land, to look after the amenities around the building, stuff like that. So when my sister told me she was paying these things, I was so confused, because I was like, but you have a house. But then her house at the time was leasehold, so I thought, okay, fair, that makes sense. However, the properties we saw, they're freehold, okay? And they were still telling us that, yeah, there's service charge and there's ground rent. And that's because, you know, there's beautiful parks around, there's beautiful lakes, and they said, yeah, you lot have to look after these things. So as a community, or as a neighborhood, I would say all of you people who decide to buy the properties within that development will all have a slice of ground rent and service charge to pay on top of your mortgage to ensure that the area around your house looks nice. Okay, the people that will look after the area around your house is usually managed by an external company, and they can charge whatever they like, to be fair. But for me, that was a big con. I said, nope, I want to know that my mortgage is costing this and this is it. You know what I mean? I don't want to be paying for you to cut grass. I don't want to be paying for you to fix a gate or whatever the case may be. So for me, that was a con. I don't know how you feel about it, because...
Yeah, same.
Yeah, Cool.
It doesn't make any sense, you know. You buy a property and you're still gonna be paying extra charges of something you don't even know. Maybe you're not even using the lake, you're not even using the park, so,
Right.
and you're paying for it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense.
Speaking of that, you know, these are some of the issues that my mum even mentioned when she said don't buy a flat. You know, service charge can be ridiculous, but anyway, that's a different story for a different day. I don't know if I'm going to get into that because we're looking at houses, so I can only speak about houses. Okay, so that is the end. Definitely old build for us, but I would love to hear your perspective. So as always, please leave a comment and let me know which you would choose if you were in the position to buy now. And if any of the pros and cons list made you change your mind or made you think about anything that you hadn't thought about before. And of course, if there's anything we've missed, please leave that in a comment as well, because I'm sure other people will see this video and find it useful to hear some of your pros and cons that you have for either old build, new build, or both. This video has been more informative than the previous ones, but I hope it's been useful. I just wanted you... I just wanted you to see where we were at. Obviously, after the last episode, I then drastically moved on to just looking at new builds just because of the issues that we found in the previous house that completely put me off even wanting to look at old builds. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No.
I hope this video has been informative for you. If you do have any questions, leave it in the comments as usual. Thank you so much for watching. As
always, please like, share, subscribe, and comment.
Excellent! His order's a bit different than mine, but you get the gist, okay guys? Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. I love you guys. Mwah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Turn up the watch my flow. You know that I'll be back. Here I go.
You are the one putting in my garden, eh?